We're, oh, and we got the recording going, just so you all know. So just a little bit about the community of practice. We really wanted to do a community of practice as an effort for you all to learn from your peers that are actually working on the ground and actually doing producer training. So today, we're going to hear from Sarah Smith from the Nebraska Department of Education and Aubrey Roth from Montana Team Nutrition. And we'll first hear about how their state teams have implemented producer trainings in their states and some unique situations to how they approached implementing the curriculum for producer trainings. And then we want to open it up for questions and sharing. If you have some, if you want to share how you've approached the curriculum, please do that as well. So I'm going to first pass it on to, did we decide on who's going first? Okay, why don't we, well, let's just do alphabetical. So Aubrey, we'll have you kick it off.
Great, thank you, Tammy. Get my slides up here. All right, so hello everyone. As Tammy said, I'm Aubrey Roth. I'm the Montana Farm to School Coordinator with Montana Team Nutrition Program, which is housed at Montana State University and works closely with the Montana Office of Public Instruction. That's our State Department of Education, who administers the National School Lunch Program. So we were very fortunate to be doing our first, well, 2 trainings this year, and I'll talk a little bit about that. And I'm supported in implementing these trainings by our advisory team. So we have a pretty awesome advisory team. Some of these members signed up in the proposal stage when we were getting our grant, and then some of them have come on board through the process of getting going with the planning. So we're also funded. So this really started with getting a USDA Farm to School grant that was received by the Office of Public Instruction from the fiscal year 2021. And it has also been funded by the Montana Wheat and Barley Committee, Montana Team Nutrition, Great Northern Development Corporation, and National Farm to School Network with that stipend. So I would encourage you all to apply for that since there are stipends available. Very helpful for us. And then we also have many presenters. So we've done 1 of 2 trainings. And so here's the presenters for that first one on the slide, just to show you the kind of different folks who are involved in implementing this training. So our training plan, as I indicated, we have 2 trainings as part of the USDA Farm to School grant we received, and then 1 producer-buyer connection event that isn't using this curriculum, but it builds upon those. So originally we had intended on holding 1 training in the spring 2022 and then 1 this fall, but delayed that so they would both be in the fall. And then we also thought of holding them at the same time at trainings 1 and 2, kind of at the same time, so they would share the virtual part. And I'll talk about how we structured the virtual part and the in-person, and then the in-person sessions would be in different locations, allowing for more people to attend based on region, since our state is so big and travel across the state is, takes a long time. So that ended up not playing out. And so the 2 trainings are held completely independent of one another. And then this producer-buyer connection event will support the producers who come out of this training, in addition to other producers who have not received the training. So we promoted the first training and are promoting the second training to all types of agricultural producers, processors, and distributors. And so this includes animal product producers, fruit and vegetable, value added, all different types of producers. So we try to make sure our content is relevant for all of those different groups and divide when necessary. So I wanted to go through how we're doing our training 1, and then I'll talk about how we have changed that plan for our second training. So if you are doing multiple trainings, I think it actually is a great idea to do one and then have some time so you can adjust and adapt and then do another one, because you'll definitely find things that you want to tweak here and there. So we divided, as it shows here, our training into 3 sessions. So the first 2 are virtual, and then the third session is in person. The virtual ones were 2 hours long each. And then the last one was the in-person session was about 5 hours, I think 5.25 hours of content. And so our first session 1 included the intro module and then module 1. Session 2 included module 2, and then session 3 included modules 3, 4, and the conclusion. And then we also had an offsite tour of Timeless Food, which is a pulse crop and grain processing and packaging business. So they have lots of local farmers, and part of their business, they sell to schools throughout the state, but they do export quite a bit too. But they have worked with schools throughout their time. And then we had a kind of an informal panel on site there, including the Timeless Food staff, as well as a school nutrition program director whose school is nearby and who has kind of recently come onto the farm to school scene. So we felt like that was an excellent contact for those folks. And then, like I said, after going through this and feeling the timing out, we made some adjustments, which I'll talk about here in a second. A couple things. So for session 3, we did provide lunch and snacks and refreshments. We divided into 2 groups for module 4. I think it's section C and D. And so that's the either crop production or the livestock production planning segments. So we had 2 separate rooms, and we were able to divide up into people who just focus on crops and then animal products. Some people do both, so you could probably just do them both. And then we also combined the food safety into those sections. And so they tailored the food safety information to meet those groups' need. So yeah, that's some of the details for how we did our training 1. And then our training 2 is coming up. We start the first session in mid-November, November 15th. So our registration is open now for that training. And again, we're using the same 3-session format. And the first 2 being the 2-hour virtual sessions, and then the third session being that in-person session. And we'll host that in Hardin, Montana. So we're really excited to go to a different part of the state. The other one was in sort of the Great Falls area. So that will be an excellent new site to visit. Some of the changes that we made for planning this one are we're moving that food safety piece, the food safety and regulations, to session 2. We had so many questions. Basically every section, I think, had some sort of food safety and regulation question. And we just had to keep telling participants, like, it's coming, we'll talk about it. And so this time we just put it in the front. And so they can get some of those base questions out of the way, and then they can really focus on like how to do that planning, how to do the relationship building, and that will help them moving forward through the content. We also moved the panel to a virtual panel, and that will be held in session 2. So that's a bit different than what we did before. And that will allow them to just get those examples in their head as they're moving through especially the more specific content that they kind of have to dig deeper into these concepts. And then the tour component will be both of the school nutrition program at the school district. We'll have some of the content at, and then a nearby farm. So I personally think that it's important that producers see a school kitchen and have that experience with a school nutrition program, rather than, if given the opportunity, I'd go for that over touring a farm or other agricultural production facility, because they probably have seen different types of agricultural production, and it may or may not be an enterprise that's relevant to their type of business. If we're going to a ranch, for example, it's not relevant for someone who's growing hydroponic greens. So I think the connections with those producers are really important, but I'm really excited to have them go and actually see a school kitchen, and one that is doing farm to school well, and also is like working to grow what they're doing in farm to school, so they can give kind of that perspective of success, but also it's not so overwhelming that because they're kind of at the, I would say, earlier stages of the procurement side of things. The tours are going to be at the location. So the only transport is potentially between our meeting space, and it's a very small town, so that should be easy peasy. And then our Living Root farm is the farm that we're going to be touring. They are a vegetable producer, and in December in Montana, unless you have a heated greenhouse, you aren't producing much. And so there won't be really anything in. It's between when they have harvested and when they start their next starts. So they don't have anything in production. So we'll be doing a virtual tour, and then they'll also get to speak to that. The farm owner will be there to talk, to do Q&A and such. And so that's what our second training is going to look like. And so that's what we're planning on. So I was also asked to share kind of how different adaptations and some of the challenges. So I put challenges and solutions, what came up and how we addressed those. So I listed a few here. So recruiting and training presenters. As you saw from that slide, we have a lot of presenters. And to cover that much content, at least 8 hours of content requires a lot of different people speaking, because that's just too much. And it would be really boring to listen to one person for that long. And the expertise areas are really varied from module to module. So some of our original presenters that were part of the proposal backed out, or they're not in those positions anymore. So we had to do a lot of recruitment of new presenters, and also explain what this curriculum is and what we're trying to do and what the training is that we're trying to get them to do to be able to offer the curriculum. They're very busy people. And so I think that has been difficult to just coordinate with so many different folks. A lot of the presenters wanted to see the training conducted first before they gave the training themselves. They hadn't, they're not experts in farm to school. They didn't feel comfortable really giving the training without receiving the training. And so those pre-recorded modules that Tammy showed were really instrumental to making a lot of people feel comfortable with the content. So we were so glad that those were ready just in time for our first training. They were great. And then just getting the presenters all trained up and helping them prepare took a lot of effort too. So that was certainly a challenge. In terms of adapting their curriculum, some of the challenges we faced were some of the presenters just didn't understand or struggled to make the slides and the information their own. So really adapting it to their style, their experience, and then the resources and information that's relevant to Montana. And then I had very limited capacity to edit all the slides and make suggestions to every single presenter. So I kind of let them do what they wanted to do, and I did review them, but did what was kind of hands off from kind of making sure that flowed really well, I would say. I found it a little difficult to find exactly where to put location-specific information, like resources such as the Montana Farm to School Leadership Team or the Montana Department of Ag's various grants that they have open. So just finding spaces I found a little challenging. that would really feel like it fit there and makes sense. And then with so many presenters, it was hard to coordinate across the modules to make sure that the content was covered and built upon by previous presenters. So some of our presenters for session 3 they weren't part of session 1 or session 2, so they didn't really know what was covered. They didn't have time to really watch all of that, and they may not have attended sessions 1 or 2 either. Yeah. And then I think for our second session, I think it'll help to go through it again, but I feel like we could probably trim some of the information down to make a much more condensed training. I don't know how much of that detail they really need to just get started with school. So I'd be interested to kind of make like a beginning training and then build from there. Just a couple other things here. So timing, getting the timing down was difficult. We really struggled in our first session. We cut so much stuff on the fly. It got a little out of hand, to be quite honest. And so for our sessions 2 and 3 for our first training, our presenters really were diligent about going through, practicing, timing, and I was on top of timekeeping to make sure everybody was staying on time. And so I had to be a little aggressive with the timekeeping, especially in the in-person one, to make sure that everything happened in the time that was dedicated to that. So I would definitely have people practice and time out their sections, and then avoid splitting the module sections. So some modules have like sections A, B, C. If they're 30 minutes or less, I really wouldn't have 2 presenters bounce back and forth. It just makes it really hard to communicate timing and complicates preparation. And then in terms of attendance, we had 24 people register for training 1, which is where I capped it because of the in-person space we had. And then only 10 of our attendees showed up for the in-person session 3 training 1. So some possible solutions that we think might work is charging a registration fee. Ours was free, making sure throughout that they know that all 3 sessions are supposed to be attended, maybe providing an monetary incentive at the end for anyone who completes it, or some sort of incentive. We used this hybrid or multiple session model because we wanted to cut down the time, the in-person time, because of that travel time, because of the time out of people's schedules. I don't know that it ended up meeting the goal of trying to make it easier to fit within people's schedules, because a lot of people then didn't get all the content. So I don't know, I think you could go either way. As you can hear from some of the challenges, it's just difficult managing multiple sessions with lots of presenters and all of that. So that took a significant amount of time. And I would say that I only have about 10% of my time that's supposed to be dedicated to these trainings, which is, I would say, inadequate for having such comprehensive trainings. And we're also short-staffed, and we're experiencing quite a big shift in our program. And our presenters also are experiencing staffing issues. So everybody's kind of strapped for time, and that's difficult. Fortunately, Tammy was able to help a ton, really saved the day, as well as Andrea Alma to serve on the advisory team, and then as presenters to provide the content as well. In terms of tour and locations, just finding the right tour at the right time. We planned both of our in-person sessions as right before another producer conference in the same location, so that people could go to that other conference too, and we could kind of piggyback off of that. But it's really hard to find, those aren't necessarily the locations that have like an ideal farm to school program or an ideal tour location. So fortunately, the second training is at Hardin, which is going to be fantastic. But that is difficult. And then of course, weather and how that aligns with the production schedule. And then funding. So we were fortunate that we secured this additional funding, but without it, the amount that we had written into our grant would have been insufficient for what we needed to do. And the USA Farm to School grant doesn't cover meals or snack costs, which I think are critical if you're having an in-person meeting to make sure people are fed, watered, and happy so that they can learn. I think everybody would agree with that. But ultimately, I would say it's a success. I think that from what we heard and what we saw from evaluations, the participants were really happy with the training. And in this picture here, this is one of the participants who actually went to a school this month for Montana Crunch Time and served up pea shoots to 180 students. So that was really exciting that he's taken that first step and making those connections with schools within a month after finishing the training. And so that's all I have to say. I'll pop the link to our training to our current training registration page here in a sec, but I'll just wait for any questions.
Any quick questions for Aubrey before we transition to Sarah? And there'll be plenty of opportunity after Sarah goes to ask questions or share how you're approaching training.
Thanks, Aubrey. I had a quick question. Good to see you again. We
Nice
just
to see you.
presented on a different call yesterday. You said that the timekeeping was an issue in terms of like having to really tighten it up the second two sessions. And I'm wondering if you could reiterate like how long was the first training versus the upcoming one in terms of like how you're approaching the length of time for them.
They're the same.
They're the same.
Yeah. So for the session one, we are just going to have to make sure that that content is much tighter, and that the presenters are prepared to make sure it's within that time. The other thing is we're taking a real hard look at the different activities. That became, I feel like the activities take longer than estimated. And so we cut a lot of them. I should have said that in our content, is we ended up cutting to most of the activities. And definitely in session one, I would say one of the activities I would personally just cut is the remembering your childhood school meals experience. It went to like a negative place really fast and took up unnecessary time. And I don't think that's really the intent of this project, is to have people relive their like, this is why I don't like school lunch. So I just skip that one and save yourself some time. But yeah, the activities I think were hard to time. So we're just going to make sure that it's timed much better.
So the time what was the full length of time for them for each session?
For session one is 2 hours, and that's introduction module and module 1. And then session 2 is 2 hours for just module 2. And then session 3 was it was more like 4 hours of the content time. And that was modules 3 and 4 in the conclusion.
So it's all in one day? No, just spread out.
Spread out into the 3.
Okay,
yeah. Let me pull up that slide really quick. And that will, I think, illustrate it much better. Yeah, these are all divided up. Here we go. So you can see that session 1 was virtual, session 2 was virtual. So if they registered for the program, we expected them to attend all 3 sessions. So this one was on September 15th. This one was on like September 24th. And then this one was on September 30th, something like that. Great. Awesome.
All right, so we want to make sure we have plenty of time for Sarah to go. So Sarah, do you mind queuing up your presentation? And we do have a question from Lexi about breaking down the budget. I wonder if you could answer that in the chat, Aubrey. Or we can also have both of you talk about budget after Sarah's presentation.
Right. Do you see what I have up on my screen? Does it look like the right thing and not one of the zillion other tabs I have open? Okay,
Looks
good.
great. Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay. So my name is Sarah Smith. I recognize a lot of names on this call, so I feel like I'm talking to friends, but I'm the farm to school specialist at the Nebraska Department of Education. So I focus full time on statewide coordination of farm to school, and the producer trainings are one thing that are housed within our programming right now. And so I wanted to just, this is like a very heavy, text heavy, color heavy slide, but it is the layout of how our farm to school programming has progressed since around 2016 in Nebraska. It really did start around 2012, but we're going to start at 2016 and just see that a lot of the work that has happened in our state has really been this promotion for child nutrition programs to get involved in farm to school, with this idea that, yay, you can do this and the outcome will be all of these benefits that we know, but everything in between the push to do farm to school and the benefits has been kind of left without a lot of technical assistance and support. And so how to actually make those connections to producers and for producers, processors, distributors to connect to local foods, the value, the meaning of local foods, all of that has been, it's been a little more nebulous and a little more ambiguous for us to actually help make the ties happen. So people want to do this, but there's been some frustrations on making sense of it. And so we did see the producer training when it came out, and we were made aware of it as being a good opportunity for us to put some of the focus on producers and bring our partners together that have some expertise in the area of agriculture and enterprise businesses and that type of thing. And so you can see here, we've done some school promotion work, and then we also did a Nebraska Farm to School Institute that is a model that's worth keeping, where producers are coming into the teams, and we hope to continue that. And then these producer trainings, and we're developing a farm to school network. And we see the producer trainings also being something that can be ongoing. How it'll be funded will be, we can talk about more of that later on in the slides here. So originally we were funded through a USDA Farm to School Turnkey Grant in 2021, which made the proposal really easy to write because those activities were laid out for us. The curriculum was done. They provided this train the trainer event that we could bring our partners into as well. So it made it an easier, more tangible thing for us to pick up and run with. The challenge for us was finding the match at the time, but somehow our partners connected me to different organizations who found this to be a very valuable opportunity for them specifically. So No More Empty Pots is a nonprofit organization that functions as an education facility and a food hub, where they really want to bring self-sufficiency to people as far as health and food access and food security, urban and rural. But they do prioritize BIPOC communities and individuals. And so they saw this as being, they're having a difficult time sourcing food as a food hub, and they need more food. So they need Nebraskans to be providing more food, and they need to find a way to connect to it. And they specifically want a lot of the purchasing that they're doing to be purchased from beginning or BIPOC growers or under-resourced growers. And so this really fit their mission and vision, and they provided cash match for us. And we used that match specifically to provide stipends to producers to attend our training. And so when we wrote our grant proposal, we were able to really prioritize that our reach would be to BIPOC producers. And I also knew that if we don't have grant funding, then a lot of our partners can't be involved in farm to school work. And this was a good way to get partners on board to help with the planning and the outreach and even the training itself, doing some of the training with the curriculum. And also, of course, this goal that we need to increase readiness by producers to work with schools. And, you know, we didn't know at the time that these ARPA funds would be coming down, but there are federal funds now that will be spent specifically on food. We need producers to know how to reach schools so the schools can use those funds to buy that local product. So the timing's really nice. After several years of feeling like we were hitting the wall, it seems like things have come into place for us. And so our partnerships specifically in the grant are the Nebraska Extension, Buy Fresh, Buy Local Nebraska, the Center for Rural Affairs, and No More Empty Pots. And then we brought on to address the specific populations and communities that we wanted to have in the training. Black Chick Farm helped us with our Omaha training, and community dad Maya Pixon-Ixum attended the Train the Trainer, and he is also available to help us reach Indigenous folks from the Maya communities. And then our most recent training we held last week, which we're still recovering from, was held in partnership with the Winnebago Food Sovereignty Council and the Winnebago Tribe of Nebraska. I also want to say that in our partnering with these organizations, it's assisting us in continuing our farm to school work, like I mentioned with the funding piece, but it's helping us stay connected on things like what Nebraska Extension is doing right now is they've opened up a database. And so we're leveraging that for farm to school, the market maker database. Buy Fresh, Buy Local Nebraska, Margaret's on this call and she can hop in anytime and unmute. She's a wonderful partner with great farming background, but they're also able to help connect us with their members. And they provided some sponsorship funding as well for the tribal training. So there are benefits. The Center for Rural Affairs has several employees that are tribal members focused on food sovereignty and tribal efforts. And so even though they weren't written in as specific project partners, those people, they came on board and we now have more connections into farm to school work with those focuses. Like we're developing Harvest of the Month curriculum with Indigenous foods piece and food sovereignty. So it's helping us do that in more and more ways as well. And so our timeline for this project was we were awarded the grant in July last year. We spent a couple months writing contracts because we're a state agency and it takes forever to do these things, I think. And so it took us a while just to get all of that underway. We attended the Train the Trainer, the virtual event with NCAT and NFSN in October. And then we started meeting regularly as a planning team to figure out like, what are we doing? Like, who's going to do what? How long is this going to be? This is a lot of curriculum. Can we really expect producers to show up for this amount of time? So the bulk of our, I don't know, I would say 15 hours of meetings was just trying to figure out what we were going to, how much curriculum we were going to include, what we were going to take out in order to not lose the interest of producers in participating. There was quite a bit of just trying to get our feet on the ground with this. And then we were finally able to roll out a training in March in Omaha, Metro Omaha. And then we opened that registration. We offered stipends. I can't remember the exact amount, but it broke down to $20 an hour for time and mileage reimbursements for folks because our priority audience was under-resourced producers. So likely there's a great chance that they're leaving their workplace and taking a vacation day to come to this training during the work week. And we need them to be growing this food. So it was a win-win for us. It was provided through the grant as well as matching and funding that came from the USDA Farm to School grant. So then after our Omaha training, we took a little breather and a little break, and we started planning the tribal training next because Winnebago Food Sovereignty Council agreed to work with us. And then we just held that in October. And so as far as recruitment, of course, those producer stipends help a lot. And we make it very clear that we have limited numbers that we can bring in. And people have honored that. We haven't had any issues with that. We did use the materials provided within the curriculum, the postcards. We sent those out using our partners' the addresses they have for producers in our state and a certain region, circling the area we were trying to reach. We have a webpage, and I can drop that link in the chat box here in a bit. And we also relied on partner organizations and listservs and that type of thing to spread the word. We filled up for the Omaha training within I don't know, 48 hours or something like that when we were on a wait list as well. So I need to scoot through these slides pretty quick. For implementation, I will say that we did one single day in Omaha. We cut the activities, we cut the videos almost entirely. We didn't do any action planning, and it was still a very valuable training and very exhausting. Like, we were tired, our participants were tired, but very grateful because all in all, there are success stories from that training. But we didn't want to do that with our tribal producers, so we decided to move it to a full 2 days for the training. So the change in the presenters that we had great presenters for Omaha and for our tribal training. NDE Child Nutrition was really key. We had a local producer that did both the trainings for us, and he's very active in farm to school, and his whole business is kind of formed around farm to school actually. And so he talked about the value for his business, and it was good for both groups. Our training partner did not include the Department of Ag for the Omaha training, but they were able to come and handle food safety and FSMA for us for the tribal one. And then our panel for the tribal training, we brought in a superintendent, one food service director from a tribal school, and one from a not tribal school who has been doing farm to school for years and years. We brought in a farmer and then a bison processor from South Dakota. We also had Delberta Frazier, who's in this picture. She's an Omaha Nation public school outdoor educator who addresses culture and works with K through 8th grade, and she's incredible. She was able to start us off with song, and I was able to share using the First Nations Development Institute materials, the different components of farm to school when looking at tribal communities and schools. And she was able to put the picture to all of the facts and statements that I provided on slides. So she told the stories, she related to the traditions and the spiritual side of things for this training. And she's also growing a food business as well. We also brought in the Intertribal Buffalo Council, and that bison processor was the Cheyenne River Buffalo Company. And so some takeaways is that we actually dropped an entire component of on day 2 for our tribal training and just asked everybody to share out about what their production practices look like. And it was one of the most valuable pieces. And we heard that feedback after that people were really glad to be able to learn from each other in that way. So just relax a little bit and make sure that voices are heard and they're not just talked to constantly. The financial support was a good thing. Those partnerships, bringing in those experts the panels are phenomenal. Honoring the values for the Native communities and making sure that they're leading the training. And then in the rural communities, we had to modify some of the curriculum. It's kind of built heavy on formal solicitations, and we only have 2 or 3 school districts in our entire state that will function with that. And so we brought in the nutrition services from NDE, and she's actually a previous food service director, and she walked through what an email solicitation looks like, and we did that as a practice activity. Also, that producer workbook, the Omaha training, I made copies of all the worksheets because I was having a hard time navigating that workbook. It's so complex. But what I learned was then nobody knew how to navigate the producer workbook because I took that away from them by making copies. And so in Winnebago, we instead provided on all of the slides, this is this page in your producer workbook, it's this appendix, or it's in this module, or yada, yada, yada. So just allowing yourself to have tools to reference things within that workbook so that the producers get really comfortable with it and they're using that action planning guide as well. And we also recorded our trainings, so you'll find the Omaha one is posted on our website. And we were able to do that through NDE at no charge, which was nice. And then I'll scoot through these, I promise, Tammy. Challenges, and Aubrey talked about this. Also, we didn't recognize how much time it would take for our entire large planning team. It's a lot of hours when you look at the number of people planning these. And so we hoped to do 4 with our grant. We're gonna have to find different funding if we do plan to do that, because our partners have put in immense amount of hours to this. I agree that I don't think the activities in the curriculum are actually timed in the timeline, so you have to practice that. And I would also like to do an event with schools, but our capacity to plan such a thing is limited unless we modify things, and we will likely do that in the future. And another challenge, I think, is how do you continue these connections and relationships in the future with producers? So making sure you have a plan for that, I think, is hopeful. So we do know that our tribal training wants to continue on as a cohort. They want to meet again in a couple of months and revisit things and see how they're doing. And so I think that's a hopeful thing that we'd like to do. And again, some folks have reached out to me to tell me, because I see them at the farmers market or something like that, about how they've sold to schools since the producer training. But if we don't have a plan to hear those stories, they won't come back to us necessarily. I know there's an evaluation that'll go out from NCAT, but I think it's important for me to be collecting those in my own way as well. And we'll modify this curriculum for producer events, like we have conferences coming up in February, and hopefully we can do like a 1-hour session where we're modifying just a small piece of this curriculum. So just a quick quote that someone said they love the expert panel and they would like to have more people and businesses share their experiences in future trainings. And this is my last slide, that we will leverage these in the future because of the funding coming through. We need them. We'll include some of the activities and like market networking and meetup sessions that we do with schools and producers. And we'll hopefully be able to do this some with early childcare events as well. And I will be watching all of the videos and listening to the podcasts in the future because I haven't done all of them. And I think they offer a lot of lessons. So I hope to do that moving forward in the future. So that's what we have. Thank you, Tammy and Tomas.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's just so great to hear about your different approaches. And I would like to just open it up for folks to ask questions or share about your experiences.
That was awesome information. I'm curious about, for the virtual sessions, has anyone used interactive tools such as Mentimeter or Padlet or Jamboard or anything like that in order to increase audience participation and engagement?
We did not use those for our virtual sessions. We've used them for other trainings and meetings and things, but no, we didn't. We stuck with, we used polls we used Zoom as our platform. And so we used polls and the chat box, and then just asking people to unmute.
We also used Zoom to record our sessions live, which meant that, like you'll see on our website, Ellen Walsh-Rosman zoomed in. And while she couldn't hear us for our own technical difficulties, like we have such a great recording of everything that she zoomed in and provided. And then for our panel with our tribal training, Jamie from the Cheyenne River Reservation zoomed in from his car with Joanna, and it worked beautifully. We had no issues with having 4-person panel live and then those folks zooming in because we had that technology set up. So that was a big benefit for us.
And maybe as a question for both you, Aubrey, and Sarah, what would you say the profile of the producers that were in attendance of these trainings were? Are they, in terms of scale, in terms of just producer type, was there maybe a particular type of producer that maybe was more attracted to the training, or was that really just based off of your own outreach?
For our,
Go ahead, Sarah.
okay, for our Omaha training, we had a big difference between like folks that had been growing for decades and brand new beginning growers. And so I think that we were familiar with some of those people. When they registered, we reached out to them and asked them to actually join the panel or speak about some of their enterprise budgeting and that type of thing. So we use that and to benefit us, but it does make it hard to, like, for especially modules 3 and 4 to have people sit through some stuff that they're experts on. But yeah, so our Omaha training was pretty diverse as far as experience. The tribal training for us, they were almost entirely new to growing.
I would say ours was quite a mix of different types of producers, but tending on the smaller side. And I wouldn't say necessarily that they were, I don't know how new they were to their businesses, but some of them were value added, including like a tea business. And then we had fruit and vegetable producers, various livestock producers. Yeah, so that it was quite a mix, which I think makes it really interesting and can be a little challenging, but it was nice to have those different components that they could break out into. But some of them have, as I said, they have both livestock as well as crops. And so they wanted to hear both of those sections.
All right, we're pretty close to time. Does anybody have like one last question or contribution? It would be great to get one last question in.
All righty, well, feel free to reach out to Tammy and I if you have any questions about this community of practice. And I believe Aubrey and Sarah were able to share their contact information, so feel free to reach out to them if you have any specific questions later on. Please track the work of our project team through our project website. I can put it in the chat once again. You'll find a calendar in the midsection of that front page there. And there you'll be able to see any kind of upcoming events that we'll be hosting, as well as future local producer trainings happening around the country. So stay tuned for more resources to come through our project team, as well as some of the producer trainings that'll be happening in the next season. All right, it's been a great hour with you all here. We covered a lot of ground, so thank you so much for joining again, and we hope to see you next time.
Thank you so much, Sarah and Aubrey. We appreciate your perspectives and your work on this.
Thank you.
All righty. Oh, yeah, thanks so much again, and yeah, take care.
Bye.
Bye now.